Hello, and welcome back to the 186th. This week, in episode 2 of our new series, The Bad Batch, we are very pleased to be joined by two players who need no introduction, Timo Raabe and Niklas God. Hello, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
For this series, our players have picked lists from a selection that won one or fewer games at a recent major tournament. They then run them into each other and join us to talk about the list builds and how to approach a game with a brand new, slightly suboptimal list. Niklas, starting with you, can you talk us through your list and give us a bit of a feel for your initial impressions?
Sure. So my list has Dengar with Fearless, which sadly enough doesn't work, false transponder codes, and Punishing One, which is quite decent, except the Fearless. Han Solo with Marksmanship, Kira, Maul, Greedo, false transponder codes, and Lando's Millennium Falcon. So a little bit all over the place. And lastly, Bosk with Marksmanship for that 180 arc, trying to nail that bullseye. 000, BT1, and false transponder codes. So there's a lot going on, but there's a lot of stuff I'd like to have changed with it, like placing Greedo on Bosk to actually give crit somewhere, or just taking the stress control stuff and putting it on Han Solo instead.
So some solid pieces, and as you say, maybe not kind of optimally built, and we can talk about that as we go on. Timo, on the other hand, your list maybe has one solid piece in it. Talk us through it and tell us what made you pick it.
Yeah, I picked the mighty Imperium, led by Darth Vader, with heightened perception, to PS kill PS6 guys, fire control system, and a hull upgrade. Followed by Turpenier with Daredevil to do the hard boosts, and a hull upgrade, and two famous outmaneuver ties from the Black Squadron.
Yeah, and maybe to start off talking about the lists, Timo's list was one that stood out to us for having a lot of sort of slightly unusual choices in it, and we'll talk about them more as we go through the game. But one of the nice things, that even in the early stages of this series, we're seeing is pieces that you'd never think to put on the table, but actually once they're there, do give your opponent something to worry about. And I think in this list, it's those outmaneuver ties. Niklas, looking at the matchup, is that something you were worried about?
Well, actually, yeah, because I don't have a lot of defense dice, and if they manage to get behind me, more or less all paint they roll is probably gonna stick. So I didn't really want to give them a chance to cater nor just flank out behind me. So I wanted to make sure that he had to circle around or joust me with them at least.
And Timo, to you, most of the time I've seen you play, it's been with the kind of scum, medium base stuff. How comfortable are you with the kind of small base ace? Particularly, I'm looking at Vader here, and a ship that I would normally build with afterburners. Is that kind of lack of ability to boost? Is that something that you're going to have to be careful about?
In the beginning of 1.0, I played Imperial Aces a lot, so I'm quite used to playing Aces. In that time, in the last years, it became, yes, as you said, more or less scum, medium bases, or before that, large bases. And yeah, I was not too happy with the Vader without afterburners or collision detectors. I think there are, at least in this build where you have 9 points left, I think that was the crucial part on Vader. You don't need the afterburners, but if you have the points for them, I would definitely choose them. And I am not a big fan of high bids. I nearly always play my list at 200 points if it's possible.
Interesting. And what's the kind of thought process behind that?
Because it's a waste of points. You can build like in my Boba Dengar lists. I always max it out because I'm playing a PS5 and a PS6, but I don't mind. You have to be aware that somewhere out there is a list that has a higher bid than yours. And so you've wasted maybe 9 or 10 points just to choose the initiative. And in the end, there's someone who has outbidded you and you have to fly first. So just train to fly first and win and don't need the bid. That's my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can win moving first, then you've got 10 points extra to make your list better against everybody else, rather than relying on that moving second and wasting points in every match. I think that's something I really agree with.
I saw that so many tournaments when opponents met each other at the table and they said, "Oh damn, you have outbidded me. I lost."
Yeah, I'm at 186. I'm at 185. Like, Lloyd, looking at the sort of setup here, rocks, and kind of thinking about the approach, I think Niklas is correct. Once the Imperials are behind his list, he's in trouble. But it looks like it's going to be hard work to get them there. There's a lot of arcs and there's a lot of dice to be negotiated on these relatively low hull ships before you're in a position to be behind and doing damage with your outmaneuver ties.
Yeah, I'm sort of looking at Niklas's list, and to me it feels like, I mean, he's got two solid jousting pieces in Dengar and Bosk, and then Han's there kind of as a flanker, and I feel like he's presumably also the endgame ship. You certainly don't want Bosk as your endgame ship, because it's too easy to get behind him, and that's game over for him. So I can see kind of how 2/3 of the list works, and I'm going to be interested to see how and if Niklas gets value out of Han, because especially without trick shot, it does limit his offensive output. And so as an endgame ship, there's possibly a limited amount that Han can deal with and can finish. And then looking at how you'd approach the list, to me, Timo's list feels like a version of a kind of Ace mini swarm. Now there's slightly too few ships for a mini swarm, and Ter is somewhere between a second Ace and part of that mini swarm. The way Timo's set up, it looks like he's more going to be using him as a sort of second Ace. And so in that case, you would usually trade your jousting block into the mini swarm and try and kind of come ahead there and have enough left still to deal with Vader. Now, obviously, if you can catch Vader beforehand, perfect, but that's unlikely and doubly unlikely against Timo. So I'm not sure if Niklas feels the same way. Maybe actually, Niklas, I turn to you. Is that roughly mirroring your approach and your thoughts of how you're coming into this match?
Yeah, somewhat. I more or less expect that as long as I can pick up Turf and Air, I can probably circle around and run away a bunch with Solo in the end, since Vader isn't really that fast. So as long as I can keep doing 3 bangs and boost and stuff around rocks with Han Solo in the end, I can probably win on that. But I just need to make sure that Turf and Air gets removed. And the Black Squadrons probably can't do that much damage in the beginning, at least.
Yeah, if you can tempt the ties into a joust, then it turns off 12 points. Interesting. And Timo, are you looking at the ties and Ter as a mini swarm, or is it more the ties almost like a medium base ship together, and then you have 2 aces flying around?
Yeah, I try to set up them in the center to choose a flank where I can get behind Niklas' ships. After Niklas set up this way, my chosen target was Dengar, to get him down first. My initial plan with Thur was even the same like with the ties, to get behind the big ships, sneak through the asteroid field, to just give Niklas many options to follow, so that one of my 3 elements can get behind his ships. That was my initial thought.
It feels like from Niklas' setup that he's kind of going for a pincer move, right? He wants to have an engagement with someone in the middle of the board, and for him, he's going to need both of his ships to come in at a similar speed. Now, looking as Bosk moves forward here, I wonder whether Niklas has guessed that you're going to go for Dengar first, and Dengar is going to come in slower, giving Bosk time to roll around. But your hope is, as I think I would do the same, to try and have an initial fight with just Dengar versus your ships before Bosk can get there. Is that right?
Yeah, since Bosk isn't gonna do much use if he actually jousts things, because things will usually just fly past him or K-turn behind him. So I kind of want him to be flanking or coming up the rear. So I was kind of relieved that Dengar actually got to be the first target, but it's still not something I'm super pleased with, since I do like Dengar as an end piece. But yeah, Bosk isn't going to be much use otherwise.
And as a result of that, I think we've got quite a balanced opening. So the first move, that TIE fighter just clipping that asteroid by a very small amount, but thankfully not taking any damage from it, and actually now in quite a nice position to worry Dengar next turn. The sort of thing that stands out for me about this opening is the rocks, really. So I think that the pincer move and an engage in the middle of the board is a nice idea. But I think from your point of view, Niklas, I'd be slightly worried here that the Imperials are going to be able to run down to the bottom board edge, engage Dengar, and the asteroid set up the way it is going to make it slightly difficult for Bosk and Han to get through to kind of get to the back of the list. With the rock setup, were you relatively happy with it, or would you have liked to see maybe a bit more spread out rocks, a bit more space for your large base ships to go through?
Well, I was kind of fine with having them slightly lumped together, since I tried to space out at least to the corners, but I didn't want the third corner to be covered, so I actually can circle around it with Han Solo. But since they're so large, I just tried to make sure that I had space to turn in whenever I have to go into them. Because they're both Turfiner and Vader are aces, and they're probably gonna be able to drag me into the debris cloud and shoot at me without me being able to do much about it. So I just wanted to make sure that I had space to do something while I'm there.
So you've got this sort of big open space in the top right-hand corner of the board where you're going to be able to maneuver pretty freely.
Exactly.
So we see the end of the first turn here. Timo looks to be quite nicely positioned to go and joust Dengar. And as I say, Bosk and Han presumably swinging in, but maybe gonna be kind of limited to long range shots this turn. Niklas, you said at the start that fearlessness and Dengar don't work. Can you explain that to us? Why is that the case?
Sure. Fearless says that while you're in an enemy ship's front arc at range 1 and you perform a front arc attack, you get to turn one of your results to a hit, but you don't perform front arc attacks with Dengar. You perform turret attacks. So therefore, Fearless doesn't work, sadly enough.
Yeah, and that's I think an easy mistake to make. We've seen Fearless on a few ships, particularly on Bosk actually, and again not triggering because Bosk has a 180 front arc rather than that 90-degree front arc. And I do think one of the weaker areas of the new iconography is the different arcs and the differences between them. They can be quite subtle. But yeah, so for any newer viewers, just with things like Fearless and anything that's referencing arcs, really, you need to be a little bit careful. Another kind of classic is the desire to put outmaneuvers on RZ2s, and definitely in the 186th chat, about once every 3 months, somebody will post a new amazing list with an outmaneuver I5 RZD tie, and we'll all go, oh, yeah, that's brilliant, and then remember that it doesn't work. We see Bosk coming in here, and early use of an upgrade that I'm increasingly thinking is absolutely incredible. We get the lock from Bosk onto Tur, which also, because of false transponder codes, puts a jam on there. So now, Timo, you're looking at your I4 sort of lightweight ace, who is going to be unable to get defensive tokens, and actually, wow, is banking in towards. Talk us through that. I think for all the world, I was expecting him to kind of 5 straight forward and head off for Dengar there.
Yeah, in the end, I partly regret that move, but the initial plan was to get behind Bosk and Han. And I just 5 straight and maybe boost barrel into Dengar's direction would have been better in the end, and then circle around the rock, go through the debris and come at the back of Bosk and Han the long way would have been a better choice. So in this situation, I just, okay, you can't have focus. And then I said, okay, I will just boost and pray.
Yeah, and I can see the desire. So obviously, you want to give Bosk and Han something to think about. And as you say, although you could go the long way round, that's going to be quite a lot of turns where Bosk and Han's moves are quite obvious, and Niklas doesn't really have to worry about anything. So I can see the idea behind the more aggressive move, that get positioning yourself to get behind these two more quickly.
Yeah, even this choice took me a lot of time because I could have barreled left and boosted left, but I wanted to stay there. I wanted to get behind them in this situation.
And it's the jam that's made that really scary, right? Because with a token, you're kind of thinking, oh, it's not too bad. Han in this position is not going to get a lot of dice on you.
The lucky thing, I just barely dodged the bullseye of Han, so no marksmanship for him.
Marksmanship on Han as well. Wow, I hadn't even clocked that. These ships do well, especially Bosk, obviously, with the crits. But on ships where you've paid for the privilege of not being restricted to a normal 90-degree front arc, then taking marksmanship and trying to get the bullseye seems a little bit anti-synergistic or contrary to the way that you might want to fly them.
Yeah, it's the big base and the lack of reposition as well, right? It's the double tax on it.
Han coming in close, boosting in to get the range 1 against that tokenless Turfinator, who is going to be, well, as you say, cross your fingers and see what happens. A nice bump onto Dengar here, though, denying him mods, going to make him much less scary. And Vader coming in to punish.
And again, I think we're going to see more false transponder codes, right? Because Vader being the only ship in Timo's list that can target lock, is as soon as he tries to add that target lock onto Dengar, is going to immediately lose it again.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we see. I think still worth doing. You've got to get rid of the false transponder codes at some point.
Yeah, and in this round it was the best opportunity. Dengar has no modded shots, and so I can take my target lock next round.
So Vader here we saw at range 3, only going to have 2 dice, but a good time to shoot Dengar. Ships like Dengar and Quick Draw that get bonus attacks when you attack them can be a little bit scary to approach. But I think in general, you need to take them off the board and you need to shoot them. And certainly this kind of engagement is what you want to be looking for, where you're triggering those bonus attacks when they don't have mod, when you have a good amount of evade dice, you've got your defensive tokens, and this is the time to be doing damage to Dengar. Also, Timo, with that block, you've put yellow in a nice position to get behind Dengar next turn. We'll talk through the attack dice here and then go to both of you to kind of just give us a little brief summary of how happy you are with the engagements and how the first turn went. I suspect from Timo's point of view, it's going to turn largely on whether Ter is alive or not. So Dengar starting off, 3 dice because of the punishing 1 title, but no modifications. Not a bad roll, hit crit, that's just over average on unmodded dice. But Vader, with plenty of paint there, doesn't even need to spend force, doesn't take any damage. And now we get the first shot from Han, whose arc is front to back. Range 1. Good call by Timo, not stressing. Wasn't going to get a token anyway, and certainly doesn't want to give that extra dice to Han. So only the 3. 2 hits again without mods is reasonable, and quite scary for a ship with no defensive modification. We get the crit conversion there from Greedo. Woof, and a bad start. No evades and takes hit crit. And that is a damaged engine. And that seems potentially difficult given your plan to get behind these ships, but we'll talk to you about that in a moment. Bosk here just at range 2. Important as it reduces his offense and also meant that we didn't get a 000 trigger, but does have the target lock. False transponder code's really incredible value, getting that free jam at range 3. Vader shooting here first before Bosk. Just the 1 focus, decides not to spend.
Yeah, I decided to shoot because Dengar shot back, would have been unmodified again at range 3, so I could easily do it.
And Niklas, on the other hand, is deciding not to take that bonus shot back because Vader is sat there with his focus. I think he's going to save it for the TIE fighter, which is a little bit more vulnerable. We get the boss shot here. Not a great initial roll, given that we had the target lock rather than the focus. And really unlucky with the target lock, just the 1 hit. Looks like Ter is living to fight another day, and indeed we get 2 evades there. No further damage, and not a bad outcome for Ter, given the position he was in. Just 1 final shot to finish off the turn, or this plus maybe the Dengar revenge shot. No outmaneuver on this TIE this turn. But a nice 2 hits out of hand. That's what you like to see your TIE fighters doing. Going to get to keep that focus for defense. And an early damage into Dengar. And just the Dengar revenge shot remaining. Oh, and only 1 hit. Probably going to be okay. This TIE fighter just needs paint and just gets it. So Timo, given Ter was in quite a scary position, 2 damage on Ter for 1 damage on Dengar doesn't feel like a terrible trade. Maybe the damaged engine is the thing that sort of slightly tips it in Niklas's favour there.
Yeah, the damaged engine is complicated because when I stress myself now, I have to bank or straight to get rid of the stress because my 2 hearts are white now. But it's not terrible at all because I can hard turn with white turns with a 2 speed. So not too bad. I survived. That's the biggest point with her. So let's see. Now he is just a distraction, I think, because 2 HP left in between these ships. In the end, it was not a good decision to stay there, but he survived. So let's see what he can do in the next rounds. I don't know anymore.
And Niklas, from your point of view, positioning-wise, I think I like Bosk and Han, and I'm maybe a little bit more worried about Dengar. What are you feeling at this point?
Well, going into this round, I was just glad that Dengar didn't take more damage, because I kind of felt I was leaving him out to dry. Like, if he gets any shots, then fine, but he's not going to be able to do much about those TIE fighters. So I kind of expect him to just go in and see if I can get a shot on Turfiner. I'm kind of expecting to bump Vader, but I'm really puzzled if I want to do turnaround or anything to try and get shots on the TIE fighters. But yeah, Dengar is in a really bad spot. But as long as Solo and Boss can come up and try and save him, might work out. So I'm mainly just trying to make sure I get bumps on Timo's ship so I take less shots. Because I don't want to get shot by Vader this turn.
The contrast between these lists is quite interesting. Niklas sitting there with a list with low agility but high health. Obviously taking fewer incoming shots is better for any ship in X-Wing, but these guys certainly can kind of soak it up a bit better. Timo, with the high agility ships, I think people tend to go one of two ways. There's the be aggressive, sit them in arcs, and trust that the average dice will allow you to survive, or the kind of more cautious play. With this list and in general, are you someone who goes safety first and tries to prioritize not taking that incoming fire, or are you more someone who's happy to sit there with the focus token and expect that you're not going to get one shot very often?
Depends on the situation, I think. Sometimes I'm a cautious player, sometimes I'm quite aggressive. Not Lukas Golonka aggressive, but I try to minimize the shots incoming, even with aces. I think get away, get a new engagement is most of the times better. I think that's what I'm doing now with Vader in this turn. I'm not engaging Dengar. I think I'm disengaging to get a better position and get away. So it depends. Like I said, the best way is to not get shot with your aces. I have lost so many aces against range 3 shots through obstacles when I blank out. So
yeah, I think we've all been there, and I think it's impressive these really aggressive guys. Lucas, Dale springs to mind, obviously from 186. Their ability to forget the times when the ace evaporates and just keep going is really impressive. I do think, though, if I say, I think that's probably the best approach, is this mix. You said that sometimes you're aggressive and sometimes you're defensive. I think being predictable is real bad in X-Wing, and if you are Dale Cromwell and known for always being aggressive, or you're Ben Lee and known for always being cautious, then your opponent goes into the match sort of with easier decision making, and I think that the power of mixing it up is huge, and keeping your opponent guessing and not knowing from one turn to the next how you're going to behave. See some nice positioning there from Dengar. Very good decision, I think, to get Vader out of there. Certainly don't want to be sat in front of Dengar, but possibly even worse than that would be if you end up bumped into Dengar. No defensive mods with Han and Boss kind of following up there. Niklas, is that an intentional bump there with Han to keep him sort of in a position to scare Tur?
No, that was purely accidental. I haven't flown large bases since more or less 2.0 came out. So I just did a 3-bank with Bosk, expected him to go way further. I kind of expected him to bump Vader and Solo to clear his 1-bank. So that was purely accidental.
The combination of base sizes you've not flown recently and especially doing that online is really hard, and definitely expecting the 3-bank to go a lot further than it did is something that I've been doing a lot recently, so I can feel your pain on that one. Nevertheless, it's not left Han in a terrible position with regards to Tur.
No, it's still decent. I just expected to have mods on the shot, but I still have Maul, so I was still pleased with that positioning. Range 1 to Turfiner, sure, I'll take that.
We get an initial shot there from Dengar into Vader, and no damage done. And then the important shot for Timo for this round, I think. Ooh, gets away with it a bit. Do have Maul and not taking the incoming fire, so convert to the 1 hit. But the, again, tokenless Tur is going to get away with it, and indeed rolls the evade. Is out of Bosk, so we'll live to fight another day. Still yet to take a shot, but providing that distraction that you were talking about, Timo.
It does feel like Bosk is going to struggle to ever get a shot on Ter again, right? So having given up half his health to get in that position, Ter is now in a place to just follow and harass Bosk for as long as he wants, provided obviously Han doesn't snipe him at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about Bosk struggling, unmodded shot onto Vader there. Just the one hit, and Vader through the rock doesn't take any damage. And then we see these outmaneuver ties, both nicely behind Dengar. Only one agility for Dengar, or two from this because of range. So one hit from the first guy. That's going to go through. And starting to see that these may be a problem. They're going to hover behind Dengar, just chipping a couple of damage through each time, but at least Bosk and Han are in a position to kind of come and trouble them next turn. And unfortunate blank out there from the guy who did have the focus taken from mods, so no further damage done.
Yeah, best shot on Dengar, and he wasted it.
It's not going to convince you to be putting outmaneuver ties in your lists if they roll like that. So maybe a good opportunity as we're going into this sort of third turn of the engagement. Niklas, you were talking about some changes you'd make to the list. What kind of things are you looking at?
Well, first off, remove Fearless from Dengar. Maybe put a R5 droid that gives you rerolls, so you actually have any mods on your extra shots. And with Han Solo and Bosk, I'd more or less like to just switch all their upgrades and remove the marksmanship. Because Greedo does excellent work on Bosk, and BT1 is excellent on Han Solo. So when you actually get the extra die for the stress, you get to turn the crit. And Greedo usually gives the crit whenever you shoot with Bosk.
Yeah, and I think that's it. So for the stream, Greedo has a charge. When you shoot, you flip the charge to change a hit into a crit. But while stuff is shooting at you, if the charge is active, then they get to change a hit into crit on their roll. So on an I4, like on an I6, it sounds nice. You're going to shoot first. No one's ever going to get to fire crits at you. And I think that's probably why he's on hand. But I completely agree, Niklas, that actually Bosk doesn't worry too much about it. And rather than spreading out the upgrades so that Han gets a bit of an advantage if something's stressed and Bosk gets a bit of an advantage, flipping those upgrades means that Han becomes terrifying for stress ships, and it means that Bosk is getting his crucial crit whether or not they're stressed. And I think that's some small changes to the list, but that will really improve how it plays.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like the list has been built to try and put together a synergy, whereas what you can instead do, exactly as you both have said, is swap those upgrades around and make the ships entirely self-sufficient, which means that you're not then relying on things to come together for it to work.
And even Kira on Bosk, you can just target lock the center rock and you can circle around it with hitting it, ignoring it. I think that would have been so much better in this list.
Yeah, me too. And since I don't have trick shot on Han Solo, I don't really have a reason to shoot through obstacles, since my opponents still get the extra die. Sure, I could use Kira, but I'd rather use that action to take mods against the ship I'm shooting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the second week in a row that we've seen Han in one of these Bad Batch lists. And we'll have to see how it goes for the rest of the thing. But I think that the lack of trick shot has meant that you've been far less focused on Han's bonus shots in terms of the rock setup and how you're flying. Farn, with that trick shot, based a lot of his planning around it and was actually able to get quite a lot of value out of Han. I'd still, would question Han's utility, but I think if you're going to take him, that trick shot is almost a must. So we see Ter turning in here, trying to get around. As Timo says, that damaged engine, no longer does it make your hard turns red, it just makes them more difficult. So that blue hard 2 becomes a white hard 2. We get a focus and then linking into
a normal boost. In this case, I forgot about Han's ability.
And am I right in saying that you can't link into a Daredevil boost, or can you?
You can't, because it would need to be a white boost.
To start off with, yeah. The Daredevil will work with Ter's ability, but not as a linked action. So Ter coming around, looking like he may possibly get a shot this turn. I'm not quite sure if Han's in there, but he's going to have to take fire from Han. Niklas, this is an interesting move, and one I actually really liked. So Dengar has barreled sort of clean into the middle of that central asteroid. I think a lot of players would have been turning him, trying to avoid that. Why did you do that?
Well, mainly because I knew the TIE fighters are coming in, and if I turn against Vader, they're gonna have range 1 outmaneuver shots, probably with mods against me. And since Dengar is on 6 health, I'd rather risk it on a rock. And that also gives me positioning for next turn, because the TIE fighters might not turn into Bosk. And then I can start chasing either Turfaner or just bank into Vader. Sure, I don't get to shoot this turn, but since I cleared the rock, I'm more open for following turns. And I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to take a crit combo from 2 TIE fighters this turn. So I expect to get one more shot.
I actually really like that move, and it's the kind of move I hadn't even considered as an option. But based on where Vader has gone, it brings Dengar straight back into the fight and keeps him relevant for the next few turns. I think it's really interesting. As I say, it wasn't even in the list of options I was looking at.
Yeah, I might go as far as to say that's kept you in the game, Niklas. I think you're right. Had you stayed close to these ties, Dengar is taking a lot more damage this turn than he would have done otherwise, and is not in a good position the next turn with a debris in the way and can't really pressure. Whereas where he is now, he's going to take less damage and can scare either Vader or indeed Tur from this position. So I really like that move. We saw the opening shot there. Han with a good roll and Tur doing just enough to stay alive, taking a crit, taking a structural damage. Probably not got much longer left on the board, but isn't going to die this turn. Bosk struggling to really make an impact so far. He's had the sort of single mods 2 turns out of 3, I think, but really I don't know if he's rolled more than 1 paint. Firing range 2 into a TIE fighter, and again doesn't even have to spend the focus. Good shot from the TIE fighter though. 2 hits into the outmaneuvered Dengar, so only 2 evade dice, and another damage going through. It's going to be imagining how much worse this could have been if Dengar wasn't a range 3. And then the second TIE fighter, again, 2 hits and 2 blanks there, so extra agility, but not really paying off. And Dengar is down to 3. Interesting point in the game, I think, Lloyd. We're looking like we're probably going to have Dengar and Tur dying at a similar point, and that feels good for Timo.
It does, yeah. It feels like the fight's kind of devolved into 3 separate fights on this turn, where you've got Tur versus Han, and Han is, I mean, at this point, untouched as Tur's about to roll dice. And yeah.
Yeah, and Han remaining untouched there after a blank out from Tur. He struggles so hard to get him a shot, Timo, and then he does that for you.
And so Han feels like he should win that fight all the time, right? Because anytime Tur is taking 2 actions, he's giving Han an extra dice. Anytime he ends up in a position where Han can then just boost out, Han doesn't have to take a shot at all. So Han feels like he wins that fight all day. Bosk versus 2 TIE fighters is interesting. Bosk has the potential to completely one-shot a TIE, although he's just failed to do so. And now a slightly bleeding Dengar versus Vader. Vader's not in an ideal position, but I feel like a 2-turn in, you can afford to trade a chunk of Vader to get Dengar off the table. And whether you necessarily want to when you've got the TIEs pursuing, maybe it's the safe thing to do is to turn Vader away and let the TIEs finish that. But yeah, it feels like for Niklas, this game has a real danger of devolving into 3 separate fights, of which he's losing at least 2 of them.
Yeah, so maybe we'll go to Timo first. I wonder if that too hard is on or too close to that rock. But what are you thinking with the ships here in terms of their positioning and what the role of each ship at this point?
Yes, I was thinking about the too hard with Vader, but I couldn't judge if it would fit with barrel roll options, because if Dengar comes in and it doesn't really fit, so I can't barrel roll in, I'm at range 1 to Dengar and cannot shoot back. That was one of my choices. Thur has to be careful because Dengar can chase him, and he is structural damaged, and his turns are a bit more difficult. And the TIEs from this position on, they wanted to finish off Dengar definitely, because just 2 TIEs put Dengar down to 3 hull in 2 or 3 rounds now. I think that's quite okay and a good point for these outmaneuver TIEs when they're in the right position. So they have to chase Dengar down. And I think Red is trying to block Bosk now, but I can't remember it. So I'm quite happy with my position at the moment.
And Niklas, over to you. How are you feeling? And maybe starting with Dengar, is he going to try and scare Vader, or is the more sort of definite move to go and kill Tur?
Well, I spent a long time just eyeing if my 1 or 2 bank puts me on the cloud or not. And then I start asking about points because I really want to get damage in on Vader. Then I more or less find out that Turfiner is 51 and the Black Squadrons are 31. So I kind of come to the realization that I can't escape the ties if I go after Vader. They can just go 4 or 5 straight and have shots into Dengar that's definitely gonna kill him. And I more or less come to the realization that I need to make sure that Turfiner actually dies, because Han Solo's not gonna be able to do it at range 3 or whatever, since it's easy for him to make some distance to a large spaceship that's heading away from him. And yeah, thankfully the ties start chasing, and at that point I feel like I did the right decision, trying to get Turfiner off the board instead, because I can't really do anything against Vader at this point, because the match has already gone on for like 40 minutes, so I don't expect I can catch him or do anything decent with Dengar anymore. So just try and get the points where I can.
I think that's a really good reassessment, as based on where we are in the game and the points available. I think turning on Terror is absolutely the right idea. I think as well, one thing that is very silly, and I'm glad neither of or Timo was the only one that could have fallen for it. But when you have especially a large spaceship that completely obscures an obstacle, it is very easy in the middle of a game to forget that obstacle is there. And the number of times I've seen players then go careering onto or across a rock that they'd forgotten existed because they couldn't see it. So I'm glad to see we don't have an example of that here. But yeah, I think that, as I say, the reassessment from Niklas is absolutely key, right? Always know what your win conditions are and what points you have available to score. And I think trying to take those 51 points off of Tur, especially because the sooner you take them off, the less damage is going to chip into harm, is a win from both sides.
Yeah, rather than chasing a Vader who you may not get enough shots on in the time remaining to do that, even half damage, let alone kill him. Nice block there from the red tie, limiting Bosk again to no mods this turn. Maybe he gets a good natural roll at some stage. He's kind of due one, but certainly a good idea to not let him have that focus or target lock that he would have been able to take. The yellow TIE fighter, I think, is in a nice position for next turn, and I think a decent turn to sort of gamble on where Dengar may end up, although it sounds like he's not going to be there. Also, incredible judgment if people want to wind it back. Missed the rock by millimeters to get into that position. Hand swinging around the corner here and deciding to keep his arc backwards, maybe get that range 3 shot to help Dengar out in the kill Tur plan. And we're yet to see where Vader's going to go. These outmaneuver ties, when I sort of saw the list initially, I was like, wow, who does that? But as the game's going on, I'm liking them more and more. I think for me, one of the things I like in a list, or I think is important in a list, is there can't be elements you can ignore. And whilst pieces like AP5 are really valuable for their coordinating, that coordinating effect needs to be big enough that they're a viable target. And so for 31 points for these outmaneuver ties, that you can't ignore them, and you have to take them into account, and you have to expend sort of mental energy wondering about where they're going to be on the board. You have to consider them as targets, and I think that although a 6-point upgrade feels like a lot to be putting on an i3 TIE fighter, actually I think it turns them from a piece that otherwise you could totally ignore to one that really is having a big impact on the game. So that's something I might just keep in the back of my head if I end up with a spare 30 points in an Imperial list. How are you finding them, Timo? You seem to be getting good use out of them.
Yeah, in the beginning when I saw the list, I said, okay, that's waste of points. In this game, they did very good. You can block with them, give them focus. They are tough. It's 3 dice in focus, so it's defensively okay. And even unmodded shots without maneuver are okay. So they are definitely worth these 31 points. You can play 6 of them. just an outmaneuver TIE swarm.
God, I don't want that headache. Can you imagine having to face that?
I think Niklas and I talked about it afterwards. You can put it on with name ties too, but then they are not all i3. So
maybe the maneuvering side gets a bit more difficult. We see Vader's K turn there. Nice position for next turn, but not going to be doing an awful lot this turn. The Dengar move last turn has paid off. We get hit, crit coming into a 2 agility Turfeneer, and that is the end of Turfeneer. Didn't do any damage, but has at least drawn Dengar out to the side of the board and has spent more turns than he could have done, being something for Niklas to worry about. Bosk next, with a range 2 shot into the back of this yellow TIE fighter. He's got his focus for defense and hasn't got a shot this turn, so free to spend it. And as we said before, bumped Bosk, so no modification.
I think one thing we did miss and gloss over was Han taking a lock on that rock in the bottom corner with Kira. Niklas obviously had a couple of choices, right? He was out of range for shooting into Tur. Could have rotated his arc to take an unmodded shot into the TIE fighter, but locking that rock just, again, opens up choices for next turn, right? Almost a complete dial is open now for next turn. So just that planning ahead and giving yourself a bit of flexibility rather than chasing what would have been an unmodded 2-die shot into a focused TIE fighter.
Bosk, again, fails to do any damage. Yeah, absolutely. And I completely missed that. And an excellent decision. And the kind of thing I think that it's those small decisions that we've seen on this channel that really make the difference between the kind of genuine world-class top-level players and the rest of us. Not something I would have thought to do, but that kind of planning ahead, keep the dial open. Really nice decision there from Niklas. Final shot from the red TIE fighter into an outmaneuvered Han Solo. The downside of not rotating the arc, chips a damage 3. So first ship off the board, Niklas is up 51 to 32 on points. And we've got those 2 fights developing that you were alluding to earlier, Lloyd, with what looks like it's going to be Vader versus Dengar this turn. And then the 2 big, well, I was going to say heavy hitters, but maybe less so in Han's case, versus these increasingly annoying TIE fighters. Timo, behind on points, but happy with the game state, or start to get a bit worried?
From game state, the time is running out at this moment because I'm behind. These ties are easy points to get if Niklas manages to get good shots at them. But I was still happy with the damage output of the ties. They now did in the 3rd round of engagement, they did the 6th damage in total. So at the moment, clear, Vader's going to go for Dengar. Maybe try to heighten perception, PS kill him. And the ties have to distract Han and Bosk until Vader's there. So not totally satisfied with the situation at the moment, but Thur needed to survive this round.
Yeah, and Bosk is a terrifying piece if you're in front of him, but very, very easy to deal with if you're behind him. And you kind of finally managed to get Tur into a position to do that, being really hampered by that damaged engine, as we said. And yeah, you wonder whether the game's going to come down to the lack of sort of 1 to 2 shots into the back of Bosk from Tur, but we'll see as we go forward. Niklas, in a position here that I think a lot of people get themselves into, where the 2 halves of your list are kind of flying in opposite directions. I think you've got a choice here between turning Dengar right, although obviously with the Jump Master they don't love that, to try and bring the list back together somewhat, or going left and maybe accepting that he's not going to last long and try to get a few shots into Vader. Between those 2, which do you prefer, or have you got kind of a 3rd plan up your sleeve?
Well, in this positioning, I know that I can't really escape those TIE fighters coming in. If they want to take out Dengar, they're probably going to be able to do it. So I more or less scratch the option of just turning right. I did consider it and just rotating my turret, but no, I'd rather get to roll dice. So I start thinking, can I turn into Vader some way? Since he's probably doing a blue maneuver to clear that stress. And since he has heightened perception, I start thinking that maybe he tries to shoot me regardless. And in that case, I can probably get a revenge shot if he actually gets me an arc. So I'm more or less just contemplating, does my 2 hard or 1 hard get me where I want to be?
We see that coming in now.
Yeah, and then I start considering if I should have barreled, but no. Try to focus, see if I can survive 1 turn, because I'm not getting a shot on Vader in that position.
Yeah, and maybe just sort of set up for hopefully being around next turn to take that final range 1 shot. And a range 1 double tap from Dengar into the front of Vader may turn things even further in your favour. So I think that is a good goal to get that 1 last good quality shot. We see Vader with the 2 bank here, heading up through the gap between those two obstacles, but currently with no shot.
Would have been nice with an afterburners.
Yeah, collision detector afterburners. Yes, perfect.
But as you say, we might be in the next turn or two seeing some value out of the heightened perception that none of us really love on Vader. A very niche piece. Heightened perception allows you to spend a force to shoot at I7. It gives you the ability to initiative kill things on a lower initiative ship. Obviously has a lot more value. With Vader, it's very niche, and this is one of the few situations where it may be useful. Timo, it's taken a while to consider your actions here with Vader. What's going through your head?
Do I want a shot on Dengar? I was thinking about, if a barrel, will Dengar have me an arc? I judged it as a no, and I said, okay, come on, let's go for it. That's the aggressive way, and then hope for the kill now. I think yellow still has a shot on Dengar, so I have 2 shots on him. One is outmaneuvered. So was my decision to barrel roll to the back, hit the rock next round, but maybe kill Dengar this round.
Really interesting. For me, I think it's that yellow TIE fighter that makes the difference, right? If it's just a 3 dice shot from Vader,
then it's a no-go. Then you stay there.
This move, it only works if Dengar dies. Is that fair to say?
If he not dies, it will be difficult. Then the ties could kill him and Vader can get off, so it would be still okay. But we will see what happens now.
And I suppose that the plus for Vader, although going across this rock now, there's nothing he can do about that next turn, and not going to get an action. Actually, with where Han and Bosk are, they can't get shots on him next turn.
No, he's safe.
Yeah, were they in a position where they could come in and threaten? And again, I think that makes this not a viable move. We start off with a hand shot. Again, not great, firing into the red TIE fighter, which doesn't have any shots. So spends his focus to evade the damage. Vader here just obstructed. So chance for Dengar to survive. We get trail mix to start off with, ship ability to convert to a crit, fire control system, and focus, and ends up with hit crit. Oof, bad roll from Dengar, but spends the focus, just taking hit crit. But the crit is a direct hit, and that is a dead Dengar. Yellow TIE fighter not needed. Dengar off the board. And that barrel roll in front of the rock now looks like a hugely good decision. No further shots. Timo now up 63 to 51. And Han and Bosk in a slightly tricky position, Niklas?
Yeah, I don't really see a good way of getting them to re-engage here, since you don't have any turnaround maneuvers with Bosk. You just have to lean hard into that 2 hard or 3 hard and just hope that your opponent makes a mistake. So at this point, I'm strained, I believe, or stressed, but I'm just more or less expecting Bosk not to take any actions at all for the rest of the game. So I just want to make sure that I can get him in on the time remaining. Bosk isn't likely to get half pointed yet. And Han Solo just want to try and get in as well, because I need shots, since I'm behind on points and I'm not very likely to get many points on 3 agility ships.
Yeah, there's a point in every game, isn't there, where your YV666 just starts doing 2 hards for the rest of the game, and this feels like it might be now.
Or 3, yes.
Yeah, the TIE fighters getting into a nice position, nice K-turn there, behind the list. Going to have to be slightly worried about Han, but out of arc for Bosk. Bosk just clipping this debris here. Ooh, and rolling a crit, that's unlucky. Onto shields, so not too much of a problem.
Oh, I forgot that.
I totally agree, Niklas, with the decision. I think you need to abandon actions at this point, not worry too much about the debris clouds, and just try and get arc around and get shots. So I think a good choice, unlucky to take the damage. Han coming in, massive advantage from that Kira target lock from 2 turns ago. Now finally getting an arc round and a reasonable shot. He's going to have a choice. He's going to have a focused TIE fighter at range 2, but probably the better choice, we'll see in a moment, is a stressed TIE fighter at range 3 with no tokens. To even things up, Vader also rolling a crit off the rock, also taking a shield. Has a hull upgrade, but still 3 damage to half, so that may be relevant later in the game. And then we get this hand solo shot, indeed, into the stressed TIE fighter. So bonus dice because of the Lando's Millennium Falcon. 2 hits. It's a chance to do damage. And does so. So first plink into the TIE fighter. 1 off half. Certainly things moving in the right direction. But now these TIE fighters get to take their revenge shots. I wonder if Bosk has Vader. No, Bosk.
The problem was he halved the TIE fighter because it was directed.
Yeah, I missed that. Sorry. So yeah, we saw the Greedo convert to a crit there. TIE fighter takes the direct hit. So points is very important for Niklas and actually puts Niklas back into the lead. 67 to 63.
I wasn't expecting to get many damage in there, and I'm kind of expecting Solo to just eat a bunch of damage here.
And so it takes the first shot. No outmaneuver here. The arc in the right direction, and the 2 agility is enough. Range 2, maybe slightly scarier. This guy's got a focus token, but only the 1 hit. 1 evade, still got focus, still got force. Oh, and rolls the evade. So nice. They definitely a good turn, Niklas. I think you needed that. Slightly fortuitous, although shooting into a tokenless TIE, always likely to take some damage. And points-wise, now up, and Timo just has to be a bit more aggressive, which certainly helps you with moving second and with your more limited choices, especially with Bosk. Just continue to turn around that center rock with these 2 now?
More or less. I kind of regret taking the focus with Solo, because I forgot I had Maul on, so I already had Force, because I was leaning towards taking the lock and moving it to the center rock.
Yeah, that would have been great in that situation.
3 bank and just park myself on it, and probably get some decent shots into either Vader or the damaged TIE.
Yeah, that would have been very nice. With these brand new lists, it's the first time you're playing them, easy to kind of forget those little bits of the list. Certainly with so many upgrades on the chips as well. But yeah, in hindsight, that would have been really nice. And the same trick you performed a couple of turns ago with freeing up the board. As it is not terribly, it looks like Han can go straight. It just maybe that he and Bosk are a little bit closer together than you want them over the next couple of turns. And Timo, need to score some points now. Do you have a preference like Han or Bosk? Which do you think is going to be easier to deal with?
I can't remember my thoughts in this situation, but normally Bosk are the easier points.
Yeah, you feel like almost any shot the TIEs have into Bosk at this point is going to be outmaneuvering him.
Yes. I think I'm trying to go for Bosk, but I really can't remember. You should go for Bosk now.
I think if it was early in the game and you're in this position points-wise, then I would be planning moves to kind of first avoid the arc of Bosk and then sort of point to take some shots and get some damage. You need to be a little bit more aggressive, I think, because of the relative lack of turns, and you don't have as easy a choice as that. But nevertheless, I think still in a reasonable position, certainly with a very good chance of winning the game. Nice hard turn in from the TIE fighter there. May not end up with shots on Bosk. Bosk arc dodging, but in the way for Han, likely to get a shot on Han. Hard to see where he could go that doesn't get shot. And then Red coming round, also not quite getting Bosk this turn, but in a nice position next turn.
Yeah, but maybe a 2 hard from the yellow one would have been better.
Is there an argument? Well, it's tricky. For the 2 bank from this red TIE fighter. The downside obviously is that you give Bosk a better shot, but you're then in the way for next turn. At the moment, it's just a lot of hard turns, and you're not quite catching the back of Bosk as it is.
I wonder whether there's slightly too much risk there with the bank putting you in danger of the rock as well with only 1 health left.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, forgetting that direct hit. Yeah, with 1 health, I think discretion is definitely the better part, fella.
Yeah, then you had it to bank and barrel roll to the left or something like that, and then get a shot from Han.
Yeah, the TIEs can happily just trade with Han at this point. While they're tokened up and not stressed, Han is not very scary to them. So you can just continue to play just dancing around this rock with ships, I think.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Just waiting for the Vader move here. Han, indeed, without that lock on the central rock.
It didn't bump, that's why it's taking a while, because I'm considering if I want to rotate my arc or not, since I'm questioning if he's going to get outmaneuvered on both or not, and I just decide to go for a lock since I have force. Since I want to plink in that last 1 damage on the red one.
Yeah, get those points, get that gun off the board. I think that's a very sensible decision. Well judged there to fit that 1 in. That must be very close to the back of boss space. So Han opens up only 2 dice because of the lack of stress. Ugh. And the target lock not helping you out. So 1 hit, which becomes a crit with Greedo, and 1 evade. So that TIE fighter lives.
And here in this situation, I should have barrel rolled to the left with Vader to have a better position for next round. Messed it up.
But Vader taking that shot, obstructed into Han. Han's going to get the extra agility from obstruction plus a bonus from his ability. We end up with 2 crits. And I think the decision to spend here on the final dice of a hit, crit, crit. Not bad. No takens on defense. And Han is going to spend his force to take 1. Still has shields, so not a crit, but starting to take some damage.
But I was quite happy with just taking the 1 shield there from Vader. Could have gone way worse since I didn't have anything else than force. But that Han Solo ability, just giving me the extra defense dice when it's obstructed, really pays out.
Finally, a nice unmodded shot there from Bosk. Hit, crit. Could have been perfect, but Vader able to spend force and evade all of that. Well, if that crit had gone through, that could have really have changed things up. And now we get these TIE fighters still on the board, still taking shots. 2 hits here into Han. Not outmaneuvered, but only has the single evade dice. They're going to be taking at least 1. Oof, and takes both of them. And we've got a range 1 shot coming up from this last TIE fight. This could be a bleeding Han by the end of this turn. And hit crit, which just goes through, no agility because of outmaneuver. And the crit is a stunned pilot, which, given all of those rocks in front of you, is maybe not exactly what you want to see at this point.
It wasn't really ideal because at this point I would have been fine with taking the stress from the debris cloud just to get shots that might be decent on the TIE fighters. But since I get that, which still makes me take damage even if I have a Kira lock on obstacles, so I more or less have to go straight here and try and run away somewhat at least. Because Han Solo isn't gonna be able to stay in the scrum and duke it out with the TIE fighters anymore.
That's interesting. I think I'd probably have made the same decision, but given where the Imperials are, Yellow isn't going to be able to hard turn because of where Han is. Vader needs to avoid that rock, and so Red's the only one who can kind of do that 90-degree turn. Did you consider just turning Han anyway and taking the damage? Because it may be that you end up only in 1 arc if you do that. Or do you think that actually you end up in more arcs than that and it goes badly for you?
I was considering it, but even if I managed to kill the red TIE fighter, the yellow one's probably gonna be able to throw a bunch of dice at me, maybe get 1 or 2 damage in. I'm still on the rock. So I wouldn't like my chances just flying around with a healthy Bosk and Han Solo dwindling on 1 health while there's a almost healthy Vader that can just initiative kill me.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think that the issue is that 1 hard on that yellow TIE fighter, I think bumps, but is going to turn the arc enough should you have tried to hard turn away. We get the bank. Timo predicting that you are going to go straight between these obstacles. Just clips the debris, so gets stressed, but doesn't take any damage. Red just running for the hills, trying to stay alive on 1 health. And I think, again, a decision I quite like at this point. That 15 points could definitely be relevant in the end game. And Bosk there, is that on the rock or avoiding it?
I think it was the same thing with the debris in the beginning for the yellow tie. Optical, it was a bit on, but the machine said it was not on.
Yeah, and I think that's the sensible way to play is to go with what the readout says. So Bosk not on the rock, does remain stressed, but is going to have what looks like a range 1 shot into Vader. Vader has the ability to barrel roll, but would be barrel rolling out of a shot on Han, and that doesn't feel like a great decision given game state. Finishing off Han here is going to really put Timo a decent lump ahead. Vader trying to barrel roll in to avoid the arc that way, but it doesn't quite fit. so ends up sat there with focus lock on Han, and we are into the next engagement phase.
And just before we roll dice, I think it's worth saying that 3-turn, as tight as it was, I think is the right choice either way, right? Because that's the only way boss gets shots in future turns.
Absolutely. As you see, even if he's on the rock there, he ends up sort of in a position where he's going to be able to threaten the next turn. So Han, finally, rolling a lot of dice. So range 1 plus the stress. Oh, and 2 damage, and that's another half a TIE fighter. Niklas now 83 to 97 points behind, and I think were he to kill either of these TIE fighters, he would go just ahead. But obviously that's without taking any more damage and not getting anything halved. You get the Vader shot into Han next. Range 2 with target lock. 1 agility on Han here. Start off again with trail mix, convert to the crit. Fire control system this time not providing any extra hits, but able to spend the force for hit crit.
Yeah, to have the guaranteed crit on Han, it was important.
And Han has his more force, but does take that crit. As these big ships do, starting to look a bit on fire. It takes a fuel leak, which with Vader and his automatic crits may be very relevant later in the game.
At that point, I more or less feel that Han Solo is more or less doomed, so I just need to start running away with him. Because I might be able to get 1/2 point more somewhere with Bosk.
And with Vader shooting into Han, like one shot could easily kill Han at this stage.
Exactly. Like, if Vader gets a decent shot, Solo is just gone.
We get a slightly late 000 trigger there. Timo kindly allowing and giving the calculate.
Yeah, we were not used to this list, so we were definitely doing this all the time throughout the game.
I think that's very fair. And we get hit crit again into Vader. Ooh, and this time not enough paint. So we spend a force for 2 evades. And Niklas, opportunity there, I think, to split that crit into 2 damage, which was missed. Is that correct?
Yep, definitely.
Oh yeah, I totally forgot this.
Didn't even consider that, actually.
Which would have halved Vader as well, right?
Which would have halved Vader. So big miss, as we say, easy to do at the best of times, and certainly when given brand new lists by 2 jokers on a YouTube channel. Presumably happy to finally do a damage with Boss.
Yeah. Finally rolling paint on Bosk was like, oh yeah, score.
But as it is, that might be big. 1/2 points on Vader here, and I think you can afford to lose Han.
Yeah, if I had 1/2 pointed Vader there, I would have been way more comfortable. Then Vader can't trade shot as easily with Solo anymore.
So the yellow TIE fighter there, Han just out of arc, so at least not taking any more damage this turn. But as you say, is very vulnerable to a Vader who maybe shouldn't be, but is still above half. Bosk not got many options. Presumably another hard 2 or 3 come round, take the shot on Vader if you've got it, maybe, but more likely it seems that red TIE fighter. And you've already said that Han is going to run away. Timo, limited turns left. I think there might be 2 more in the game. You are up on points, but not by a lot, and you have 3 ships now that are one off, giving up some more points. What's your kind of basic approach in this stage? Are you kind of thinking more along the lines of keeping it safe, or with Han being so vulnerable, is the kind of more guaranteed way to win to go and take the rest of those points off Han?
I didn't play safe enough then. As you see, I barrel with the yellow one to maybe block a move left of Han, because I didn't consider him running this way, because most of the time it's better to run in the not obvious way. When he would have run left because Vader's going right, would have distracted Vader from him. So I tried to block that with the yellow one, but staying there tokenless now.
And definitely, you say like in hindsight a mistake, but definite reasoning behind that. So the position Vader's in has covered this runaway to the right and would have caught Han if he'd gone left because he'd have bumped. Had you not put that TIE fighter in a blocking position and Han had gone left, then Han would have been free and not taking shots from Vader this round, and maybe even not the round after. So I actually don't think that barrel roll was a mistake, although it's not ended up going particularly well, especially given the fact that Han has just rolled 2 crits. Oh, and one evade, and that is a dead TIE fighter. And Niklas now up 98 to 97, but Vader with a good shot. So Niklas up at the point. I think I still prefer your position, Timo. Those crits are going to count double with the fuel leak. With 2 turns left in the game, do you think 1 or 2 damage here, and you're looking pretty good. So we take the range 3 shot. Nice, 3 hits. Turn 1 to a crit. Han's going to have those 4 evade dice, but only has the 1 force to modify them. And just enough. So no further damage on Han this turn. Let's see if Boss can make this an even nicer turn by finishing up this TIE fighter. Got a choice here, Niklas, of the TIE fighter or Vader. Vader at range 2. What do you go for?
I go for Vader since if I get 1 damage in at this point, I more or less guarantee that I get enough points. And if I get something that affects the movements of Vader for next turn with a crit, then that would have also been great to just make sure he stays honest during the last turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we're planning here, we're more or less seeing that we're going to get timed.
So last turn of the game coming up, and that makes perfect sense. Vader at 78 points and Han at 67. So if you half Vader, you can afford to lose Han Solo. Whereas the TIE fighter, those extra 15 points wouldn't have really changed the game state. And Vader was the less defensive, given that he had 1 less agility dice and only force rather than the focus. So this is it. 1 move left. Timo, just glide towards Han and hope. Is there anything more to it than that?
I don't see anything else. As I said, afterwards, the barrel roll was the wrong option because now Niklas is up 1 point. Maybe I should have stayed safe and just focus. But now the only option is to get Han with a lucky shot. I think Red is going to be turning into Bosk. Yes, barrel rolling, I assume, something like that. Because Bosk is going 3 hard to have an outmaneuver shot on Bosk, but no possible way to half him.
Yeah, Bosk, having only taken 1 damage, you would require to do
5 more.
Can't do maths.
A lot.
A lot. 5 damage with 3 dice, and only 1 crit that could possibly go through because there's 2 shields. The Han shot, quite a nice position here from Han, rotating. I think I might have been tempted to take a focus there, but I presume wanting to have the shot on Vader to get the chance of getting those half points and meaning that it doesn't matter whether Han lives or not.
And again, with an afterburner, it would have been perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. The number of times that afterburners would have been useful in this.
Would have been best option there, yeah.
Yeah, so afterburners maybe gets you to range 1, giving you that 4th dice. With the crit at that point, you're looking at a reasonable chance of doing 4 damage. But here, we're going to be range 3, needing to do 4 damage with 3 dice, and maybe even obstructed. It's looking unlikely. Not impossible, but unlikely. The fuel leak gives you a little bit of hope. We get the Han shot first. If Han can do damage here, then Vader's shot is irrelevant. 3 dice has the force, but I would guess not going to spend it. Hit crit. Decides not to spend the force there. And Vader is fine, although taking a shot from Bosk, so not out of the woods yet. And this just clips the rock, just obstructed.
We had lots of situations where it was very close in this game.
And that's going to make it very difficult for Vader to get the damage through here. Gets the crit. That's going to help. Has fire control system. Going to need some paint on this dice. Oh, and doesn't get it. And I think that barring a blank out and a direct hit, that this is going to be a living Han Solo, but still not impossible. But there we are, 2 evades, and Niklas takes it. Final shots of the game rolling in here. Boss going to try and do some damage to take half points off Vader. But with a roll like that, probably not going to manage it. Vader just needing a single paint. And then this TIE fighter is going to do some damage, but not enough to make a difference. So that's it. Well played, guys. Real close game. I thought you both did excellently with the lists you were given, and super exciting, down to a 1-point finish. Timo, starting with you, we'll save Niklas for last, seeing as he had such a convincing win. Looking at the list and how the game went, are there bits of the list that you would consider taking to a kind of competitive tournament? Are there sort of small changes that could be made that would make a big impact to the list?
So, yeah, Vader and the outmaneuver toys, I think that are elements you could definitely take in a competitive list. I would drop off height and perception, that's for sure. Then you have, with the 9 point you already had, I think height and perception was 3 points, and you have 12 points, and third, you have 63 points left to do with. That could be 2 more Black Squadron races with outmaneuver. So
yeah, that sounds pretty nice, doesn't it?
Maybe someone could give it a try. Mini Swarm of outmaneuver ties and Vader. Why not?
Yeah, we've seen Ace Mini Swarms do well a few times in 2.0. And I think adding outmaneuver to them would definitely add another wrinkle for people to have to account for sure.
And in this case, I wouldn't play it as 4-ship Mini Swarm. I think I would split them into 2 small 2 ships with outmaneuver.
Yeah. So people have to choose a group, right? Whichever group they choose is the wrong answer, because then the other group are outmaneuvering.
Yes, and you're still Vader as a threat. Or you can just add Afterburners. I think they are at the moment at 7 for Vader. So then you have 56 points left to spend. I think you can get a good winner with it.
Yeah, that kind of 50-point mark gives you a lot of options, Imperials. I can't really look past Homing Missile, Fifth Brother at 50 points, but maybe with the outmaneuver ties, you don't really need more anti-ace tech, and you're looking for something that kind of hits a bit harder than that.
Ter's one of those pilots that there are some players that just have a real affinity for him and are kind of determined to try and make him work. And I wonder if in the kind of generic swarm meta we're in at the moment, he maybe has some more value. Obviously, we didn't see it so much in this game, but I wonder if that's why he was added to this list. I don't think he's a great pilot. It might just be the best time for him, potentially.
Yeah, and he is tricky, and he's something you don't see very often. I've certainly been surprised in casual games by Ter in the past. It's just hard to look past the other options that are for the same points.
Absolutely, yeah.
So definitely the winner for me of this game are the outmaneuver toys.
Mm-hmm.
I can recommend them. I think they did now, with the last 2 damage on Bosk, 8 or 9 damage in that game.
So we're looking at 2 weeks in and 2 different cheap TIE fighters with unexpected EPTs as being the heroes of the lists.
Absolutely.
Niklas, going over to you. Well done on the win. Close. Could have been a little bit less worrying towards the end there if you had remembered that possibility. But as I said, easy to forget with a new list. For you, you run a lot of scum lists, but not with these big ships. Are any of them something you'd think about adding into your lists? Or are there just basic things about the ships that you don't like?
Well, since I'm not really good at flying large bases, I'm not very inclined to use them in my current competitive lists. But it was nice to fly Han Solo once again, since I tried to make him work when 2.0 came out. And since then, I do look at it once in a while when the points keep dropping, and just shrug my shoulders and realize, nah, not going to work for a while.
I think that's the kind of thing that's unifying the entire XCOM community. We're obviously all sat there looking at Han Solo from time to time thinking, it just feels like you should be good, but you aren't. Cool. So, Lloyd, I think we'll leave it to you for final thoughts, and then we're done.
Well, I think we find something in all of these lists and all of these matches. And I think, again, actually what we saw potentially was 2 very good players getting potentially more out of a list than the value it had. We've already mentioned the ties with expensive talents as an ongoing theme in this Bad Batch series. Something we didn't talk about much during the game, but it's nice to see Maul get use. Now, obviously, he's not available for Boba. He's come down in price, and he's actually a good buy for most scum ships. So I actually quite like seeing him now on a diverse selection of ships rather than just stapled to the ones he was. But I think actually the real takeaway for me for this match has been false transponder codes. And I think we've seen them in just about every scum list since they were released, right? The value that Niklas got out of them at the start of the game was just tremendous. The amount of problems they cause.
Absolutely.
They seem to be working well in most squads, since you can more or less just make sure that any ace doesn't have any defensive tokens during the first engagement.
Yeah, if your ship has an illicit, I think you need to think long and hard about why you're not taking false transponder codes. But I am really interested to see the impact on the meta that false transponder codes has. I think it could be one of those meta warping pieces where it makes it very difficult to bring lists that rely on ordnance or high agility aces. I think are going to really struggle against them.
Yeah, but if you have aces, not like Tur in this match, that can put their lock on a rock first, then they are quite safe against the force responder codes in the beginning. But you have opponent that forget to lock something if the opponent has a chance to jam. So always hope for the forgetting of things.
Yeah. Always hope your opponent is less good than you.
Which thankfully for our two guests today comes up pretty often.
Yeah, much less often for us. Have you noticed that?
It does.
Okay, that seems like a very sensible place to end. Niklas, Timo, thank you very, very much for joining us. Another great episode. Hopefully all you guys watching enjoyed it. Do you guys want to plug anything?
Oh, actually, during the 20th of February, they're having the Swedish Open in TTS. It's going to be nice to play a hyperspace tournament for once.
Yeah, I think it could be quite interesting as well. So that's something to look out for. And Timo, you've obviously got your channel. It's highly recommended. Anything else that you'd like to plug or say to anyone?
Yeah, I hope to see everyone at the Swedish Nationals. I have to look into hyperspace lists for myself. haven't have a look into it since ages. And yeah, joined the German unofficial nationals the last weekend in January. The Augur team, I'm not on it, has really cool prizes, a really cool trophy for the first place, cool templates for the first 4. Lots of cool tokens, and I think there's also a silver Naboo fighter from the Comic-Con last year in the prize pool.
Oh, nice.
So, everyone join the DMX, organized by the X-Wing SHG. Funwalk, Daniel, Dodo, everyone known from the German community is in the organizing team. All the streamers, all the organizers. They are doing a really good job, I think.
Awesome. And I think that's a good opportunity to thank everyone who's keeping X-Wing going. It's really appreciated. We have been spoilt with the amount of online tournaments, as you say, good prize support, good high-level competitive play, and it's really made a huge difference to everyone getting through what is increasingly becoming a very boring lockdown. So thank you to all those guys. Thank you again to you guys for coming on. Thanks to Lloyd for his constant support. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for only taking 22 episodes to say that.
Well, you've only been supportive for the last 2, right?